We are certainly glad to have each of you to join us tonight. It is an honor and a privilege. My name is Melvin Whittington. I'm the pastor of this house, and we are certainly glad to extend a warm welcome to all of our guests tonight for the first of what we are going to call our God and Country series. And if you would like to always know about those events, if you'll, I've got ushers that are right now going to come. If you'll just raise your hand up, be sure that you give me your email address, and I'll always let you know when we're having events like this. So fill out the card, give it to me. I'll be at the back door as you're going out, and fill that out. So just slip your hand. If you've never been here and you didn't get an email from me already, please put your hand up, and we'll be glad to send you some information. I want to start out tonight. You know, the Bible tells us that we are to pray for those that are in leadership over us. And I want to start out by quoting tonight a quote that I saw today that came across Facebook. But it is from our president. And here's what he says. As long as we have God, we are never, ever alone. Whether it is the soldier on the night watch or the single parent on the night shift, God will always give us solace and strength and comfort. President Trump. Wow. So that's something that we do here every Sunday. We pray for our president. We pray for all of our leadership every week when we gather together to worship. And certainly, let me say that if you do not have a church home, we would welcome you. Come and give it a try. It's a two-time church. The first time, you come back the second time just to get over the shock from the first time. And we may be a little different, but we have a whole lot of fun serving the Lord. And so you're welcome, and let me just say that we would love to have you. I'm going to have my good friend and head elder here at the church, David G., come up and introduce our guests.
All right, Tom, thank you very much. Mel, and you know what? We're not used to having crowds like this on Wednesday night, so whatever we're doing, can we do it again sometime?
Good crowd.
Because this is kind of exciting. There's a buzz in the place. And in fact, there's a lot of good people here tonight, and one of them is sitting to my right. And I'm going to ask him if he would just come up and open us in prayer. But also, he's got a very special quote that he just got just a few minutes ago. Anybody ever heard of a guy named Dr. Dobson? Well, this guy hangs around with people like him, and he can start dropping names, and they're personal friends of his. But Dr. Kirk Elliott, I first met one time when Aileen, who's in the back, Aileen, let everybody know who you are. She started the Tea Party here in the Villages, did a great job, brought a lot of good people in, and they've become our friends. But Dr. Kirk Elliott's a special friend, and I'd ask him to come up if he would to open us in prayer and then to share a couple other thoughts. And Dr. Kirk Elliott, all the way from Colorado.
Thanks, David. It's good to be back in Florida. I was actually in Georgia, in Savannah, just earlier today, and David said, come on down. So I did. Just glad to be here at your church. So he asked me to just open up tonight in prayer, so I'm just going to take a couple minutes to do that. But a lot of you, some of you know me, a lot of you don't. A lot of unfamiliar faces, but I serve on Dr. Dobson's board. I speak all over the country and do stuff, but he just sent me this email literally like 20 minutes ago, and the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, you know, that's in Colorado, he just did a statement on it, and it's going to be announced someplace here soon. So he said, this long-awaited victory should encourage Christians throughout the nation whose religious liberties have been routinely trampled. We believe this decision will help to motivate conservative voters in the upcoming 2018 midterms to elect more senators who will vote to confirm originalist judges and justices. A reformed judiciary will help to revitalize and restore America to its historic greatness. Today's Supreme Court ruling is a step in that direction. James Dobson, PhD. I love Doc, and I love it that he made that statement because a lot of people listen to him. But the underlying thing there is we still have a free country. You know, and when we as believers, you know, 2 Chronicles 7:14 says, if my people, who is us, it's the church, will humble themselves, seek my face, repent from their evil ways, then we'll hear from heaven, I will heal their land. You know what? What's the impetus of healing our land? It's us repenting and waking up. And this is what you all are doing tonight. You're in this series that you're all doing. It's amazing. And you know what? We just have to make our voices heard. That's what a free country is all about. And I was just reminded, you know, a couple minutes ago that it's the 74th anniversary of D-Day. You know what? America has an amazing place in the history of this world. We help protect those who can't protect themselves. We defend the defenseless. We can actually become fathers to the fatherless as Christians. And you know what? D-Day says we went and we fought against the evils and the atrocities of this world, and we won. And you know what? I'm proud to be an American. I'm very thankful that you all are doing this series, and it's an amazing thing. And you know what? With everything that's happening in this society, if we stop focusing on how much we're different and start focusing on how much we have in common with each other, and just be the Jesus that Jesus was to everybody. You know, he hung out with the prostitutes and the tax collectors and everything else. And you know what? He was Jesus. And that's who we need to be. And love your neighbors and focus on what you have in common. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them. It just means you have to love them and find the things that you have in common and win them over. And so let's just pray and dedicate tonight to that thought. So Lord, we're thankful that we have a wonderful model in Jesus to follow. Somebody who loved his neighbors, somebody who didn't condone their activities, but yet recognized who they were, where they were, and said, you know what, I love you so much, I don't want you to stay the same. And that's the Jesus that we serve. And so tonight, as we hear about things that we can do to wake us up, to empower us, to give a fire under our feet and go out and make a difference in this world, I pray that we would remember that, to do it with the love of Jesus, and one by one we can win over this country and make it a better place by focusing on what we have in common rather than how we're different. So we give you this night. We're thankful for the freedom. We're thankful for everything that you give us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen, brother. Have it back one time. And Brother Kirk will be one of our speakers in this series, I'm sure, in the future. I just want to do, as you are coming up next. Yeah, I'm sorry. You know, I just go with the flow here. But, John, come on up just a second. Yeah, if you would. I just want to do a quick little survey by raise of hands. I'm going to ask you three things. Number one, did you hear about the event tonight through an ad in the paper? Did you maybe hear about it through a flyer? Or maybe you're a member of the church here. So if you saw this event in the paper and that helped inspire you to come, just helps us to plan the future, raise your hand. You saw it in the paper. All right. Well, thank you again. Okay. If you maybe saw one of the flyers that we did quite a few flyers. We passed them out. Did you get a flyer on the event? Bill did. Okay. Bill, good to see you. And okay, thank you very much. A few there. Well, how did the rest of y'all know about tonight? What? Emails, Facebook, Big Mouth. Lisa, whoa, okay. Anyway, I just want to introduce the next, I think it's the 18th, it's a week from this Monday night, the speaker that we have at the Trump rally. How many people are members of the Villagers for Trumpets here tonight? What? Oh, thank you all for being here. Yeah, that's the largest group we've got, I think. So thank you all very much for being here. And our next speaker is a guy that, golly, I could talk a long time about his career, what he's done, but he most recently has written a book, and it's called Trump and the Resurrection of America. And at one of our meetings, somebody gave me a copy of the book, and again, I told him I don't have time to read books. I'm too busy doing this and that and everything else. I took it home. I said, okay, let me just look at the front cover. Look at the front cover. Then I said, okay, let me look at the index. And the index was, David, it was compelling enough. I said, let me start it. I couldn't put it down once I started. But John, John Chambers has done a great service with your book. And just take 30 seconds or so, let the people know who you are. And then I understand that you know Alex Newman a little bit? A little bit of his work? Okay, then I'm going to introduce him next. It's Kirk Bowman that also has co-authored. You've written some books, but you haven't done any with Alex yet, right? Okay, but anyway, just tell people who you are, and thank you for coming to our next meeting.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you all for being here, and I'm very much looking forward to Alex's talk tonight. I caught a bit of it recently on Alex Jones' show, actually, and it is a big wake-up call, and I think we speak the same language. I'm very happy to be here. I spent time in the villages years ago. I had founded the Save America Foundation, which was a 501c4, and I'm just real happy to be here. Looking forward to speaking next a couple of more weeks from now. I'll be covering a lot of different subjects, and perhaps we'll get that message out to you soon. Thank you.
Boy, keep it brief, keep it short, be gone. Okay, good job. Thank you, John. Okay, so we had, as we started the Trump Club, just a few months ago, we've had quite a few speakers, and one of the speakers that we've had that most of you guys, as a member of our club, says we got to get him back whenever we can get on his schedule. And I will tell you, it's not easy getting on this guy's schedule. In fact, I'm a big YouTuber, and I'm on YouTube late last night catching up with all the news, and I see this guy's picture on there with some other host, and it said, and he had only been on the post for maybe an hour, already had like 5,200 hits. So tonight when I saw him, I said, man, congratulations on the great number of hits you got. And he said, oh, you saw me on the InfoWars, Alex Jones's website. I said, no. He said, well, I did several yesterday, but he's on national TV, he's on Fox, he travels all over the country to educate the people about how the sinister people have tried to take over our great nation. Without any further ado, would you please welcome, and we're going to give the program now to Alex Newman. Alex, thank you for coming.
Thanks very much, David.
Yes, sir. Oh, thank you so much, sir.
Hey, guys. What an honor to be back with you guys. I met some of you last time I was here in this area talking about the deep state. Hopefully some of you guys still remember that big topic. So this is a different topic, but it is one of the tools of the deep state. So the two are completely related, and I would say that, for those of you who are concerned about the deep state, if you weren't at that talk, there's some magazines in the back with kind of an overview of it. For those of you who are concerned about the deep state, Trump recently called it the criminal deep state. I think that's a better term. I think this is one of the easiest, most practical solutions that we can all get involved in. So I'm going to talk to you guys about education. A lot of this stuff I think is going to be new to a lot of you. Most Americans have no idea about these things, and so normally they tell you to turn off your phone, and we don't want to hear any noise. I encourage you to turn your phone on and whip it out. Every time I say something and you say, that can't possibly be true, check it out, okay? Because I don't want you to believe me. Some of you don't even know who I am, so just fact check what I say, and you'll see that everything we're going through here is true. So we'll talk about the UN and how their agenda is actually being accomplished through the public schools. So it's almost self-evidently true that whoever controls the minds of the youth is going to control what happens in the future. Abraham Lincoln recognized that. He said the philosophy of the classroom in one generation is going to be the philosophy of government in the next. I mean, that's obvious, right? And Adolf Hitler recognized that. He alone, who owns the youth, controls the future, right? So, I mean, this is very obvious, and we don't often think about it. But who's educating most of our children? Or the overwhelming majority of our children? Well, it's the government schools, right? So and I'm going to have a lot of videos here because some of this stuff I think is so incredible and so outrageous that if I told you, you would say, no, that's crazy, that's ridiculous, that can't possibly be. But I think when you see these videos and when you see, and I apologize in advance for the heavy reliance on videos, but I think you'll believe it much more clearly as you see it. So I want to give a little bit of the history of how we got to where we are, and you need to know some of the key players before we go any further. So one of the big ones, he's often called the father of American public education. His name is Horace Mann. This was a guy who was not a Christian. He was a Unitarian, but he was living in a Christian America where virtually everybody was Christian. So he wanted to take Christ out of the schools but he couldn't say that overtly. He was a Unitarian, so he had some interesting theology. He was also a socialist. And he went to Prussia, which was ruled by a hardcore dictator, and he saw what was going on there. This was kind of a new experiment. They were taking all the children and putting them into institutions, segregating them by age, and teaching them absolute, unquestioning obedience and loyalty to the state, a philosophy that today we might call statism. And Horace Mann thought, hey, that's really neat. We should try that in America. So he did. You can see, some of the things he said. He thought education was going to be the great equalizer, right? He had a very socialistic outlook, and he really saw the public school system as a means of equalizing everybody. And a lot of people today still see it that way. So Horace Mann, the father of public education, he actually became the first education commissioner in the United States, just for the state of Massachusetts, of course. Back then, everybody recognized the obvious fact that the Constitution does not authorize federal involvement in education. And so he was installed as the first ever education or commissioner for Massachusetts, and this was a really big deal. He used the opportunity to introduce something that we're going to spend quite a bit of time today talking about, a system of reading and writing, well, learning how to read primarily, that ended up being an absolute disaster. And what we'll see is that this is now being used in government schools all across the country, and it's caused an absolute crisis. So he thought the schools were going to equalize people, and after him, he had a huge impact on education, by the way. He brought this Prussian model over, installed it in Massachusetts, and then gradually it started spreading. They started getting compulsory education laws where the children were forced, or the parents were forced to surrender their children to the government schools for so-called education. And he really paved the way for this next guy, John Dewey. He is universally acknowledged today as the founder of what passes for the education system in America today. He's called the founding father of America's education system, and for good reason. And I could spend a long time on quotes from this guy. In fact, I co-wrote a book with Dr. Sam Blumenfeld. We'll talk about it a little bit more. It's called Crimes of the Educators, How Utopians Are Using Government Schools to Destroy America's Children. And I know that title's really inflammatory, but unfortunately it's an accurate statement. And we go through a lot of John Dewey's writings because he didn't really bother hiding who he was. He was pretty open about his beliefs. He wanted a socialist America. He thought America was too individualistic, way too Christian, and so he wanted to use the government school system to change that around. So I'll give you, some of the quotes that he had. He ended up getting a lot of money from the Rockefellers. Even back then, we'll talk about David Rockefeller a little bit later, but even back then, the Rockefellers had a lot of money, and they were also interested in transforming America. So they gave $3 million through the General Education Board to this John Dewey character, and he used it to kind of take over the architecture of teaching teachers, right? So he got himself a prestigious position at the University of Chicago and later at Teachers College at Columbia, which is really the premier college of education in this country. And he used this to promote his ideas, his philosophy, and gradually to take over the teaching of the teachers so that this philosophy would go out into all the schools. He was extremely successful. And I think this quote really tells you a lot about who he was and how he operated. We actually reprinted the whole essay that it comes from in the back of this book. It's called The Primary Education Fetish. And he argued that Americans have this ridiculous obsession with training kids how to read and do math and to know stuff. And really the purpose of education should be to socialize the children and to make them into good little collectivists. And so he wrote in this essay, The Primary Education Fetish, long story short, we need to stop worrying about teaching them how to read and write and all those crazy things and start worrying about socialization. But then he says, change must come gradually. To force it unduly would compromise its final success by favoring a violent reaction. So he understood that if parents knew what was going on, he understood that if teachers knew what was going on, there would be outrage, right? There would be a violent reaction. So he had to do it quietly, and he had to do it over a long period of time. This wasn't something that could just be accomplished overnight, and he understood that. If he had come out openly and said, hey, I want to turn your kids all into good little anti-Christian socialists, people would have said, oh my goodness, get away from our kids, right? You belong in jail or a mental institution, not in charge of our schools. He also, and I think this is very revealing too, he was one of the drafters and one of the co-signers of the Humanist Manifesto. For those of you who aren't familiar with this document, it's incredibly important. I mean, you wonder, where does this philosophy that's being taught to our children in the government schools come from? Well, here is the genesis of it, right? And I could spend a long time on this. I encourage you to read the document yourself when you have some time. It is absolutely mind-boggling, in my opinion, at least as a Christian who values liberty. But the very first tenet, they tell you, that religious humanists, and it's interesting that they're honest. They call themselves religious humanists, right? Now they pretend like their humanist religion is not a religion. It's just secular neutrality, right? But they are, of course, teaching your children religion, and at least back then they had the honesty to acknowledge it. But they said religious humanists regard the universe as self-existing and not created. In other words, there is no God. The universe just exists. There is no creator. Now, we'll go through the implications of this in a minute. They also said, the second tenet, humanism believes that man is a part of nature and that he emerged as a result of a continuous process. This is evolution. So he was also an evolutionist. At this time, this idea was extremely radical, and we'll see what the implications are in a moment. Now compare this, and he also talks about we need to get rid of the profit motive, we need to get rid of private property, we need to get rid of the nation state and have this global brotherhood, very much along the lines of what Karl Marx was spouting. But anyways, compare the first tenet to the Humanist Manifesto, which was drafted and co-signed by the founder of our education system, with the very first words of the Bible, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So clearly, they're fundamentally opposed to each other, right? I mean, they could not be more diametrically opposed to each other. One of these religions is being taught to your children every day and to your grandchildren and your nieces and nephews in a government school at your expense, with your tax money. The other religion is being ridiculed, is being laughed at, is being debunked with quote-unquote science. I would argue pseudoscience, and I wish we had more time. I would go through some of that. Then we have also, in Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Proverbs 9:10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So if we're kicking the Lord out of our schools and we're saying that the universe is eternally self-existing and we all came from slime that turned into monkeys that turned into people somehow, we don't have the fear of the Lord, and so what are we building our knowledge on? What are we building our wisdom on? A bunch of nonsense, right? And so you wonder why your kids are out marching around, take away our guns, take away our free speech. This is why, right? And we'll see how this process works as we continue. Now compare this to our founding documents, our Declaration of Independence. These are the principles that created America, right? This, if there was a mission statement for our country, this would be it, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They go on to say that the purpose of government is to protect these rights. So, did they consider this to be a religious statement? No, of course not. It says right there, these truths are self-evident. This is not something for debate. This is not something that we're going to have a discussion about whether it's legitimate or not. It's just obvious. This was so obvious that every person who signed the Declaration of Independence agreed it's a self-evident truth. We're not teaching children religion to tell them that they have a creator, that God created them equally, and that God endowed them with certain inalienable rights. Right? God said, thou shalt not steal, so you have a right to property. God said, thou shalt not murder, so you have a right to your life, right? And if anyone takes that away from you, they're violating that. So this was all self-evident to the founders. This was not religious. This was not religious indoctrination. And for almost all of American history, this was taught to children in school as self-evident truth until John Dewey and company came along. So we have the Humanist Manifesto 2. They went even further. They said, the ultimate goal, fulfillment of the potential for growth in each human, only a shared world and global measures will suffice. And they get more and more radical as you go along. This is what they've believed all along, but they come out of the closet, forgive the pun. The realities of global society are such that only a new planetary humanism can provide direction for the future. So they're talking about globalism.
Up until now, it's been pretty hard to tell how well kids are competing in school and how well they're going to do when they get out of school. Is a girl in your neighborhood being taught as much as her friend over in the next one? Is a graduating senior in, say, St. Louis as prepared to get a job as the graduate in Shanghai? Well, it turns out the answer to both of these questions is no. Because for years, states have been setting different standards for what students should know and be able to do at each grade level. What we really need are clear goals. That's where the Common Core state standards come in. The standards are consistent from school to school, and they match up against international standards too. Now we know how we're doing compared to just about everyone. So even though local communities will still design their own curriculum with the same rules, everybody can compete on the same kind of staircase.
Okay, we ended up skipping a couple slides, but I think the point is clear. Right? I mean, this is propaganda from the Common Core people. They're telling you that we're moving toward a globalist education model where everybody is going to be having the same standards. Now, the implications of this are huge. Globalism and Americanism are not compatible with each other, right? And we'll see that as we go along. If we go toward globalism, we sacrifice Americanism. Okay, so the fundamental distinction needs to be made perfectly clear. Our nation is based on the idea that our Creator gave us inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, etc. Globalist ideology, we'll see a little bit as we go through, is fundamentally different and fundamentally at odds with that. See if we can. So, globalism, again, is the opposite of Americanism, and we're going to see what these people pursue when they pursue globalism. So, the foundation of our country is essentially the founding documents that we have, right? The Declaration of Independence, which kind of explained why we were becoming a country, why we didn't want to be part of, King George's little kingdom anymore. And then we have, of course, the Constitution, which puts those principles into practice. And we have the Bill of Rights, which is just, an added safeguard. Now, does the Bill of Rights give us rights? Of course not, right? They said it's self-evidently true that our Creator gave us our rights. Our Bill of Rights just codifies those and says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the freedom of religion, et cetera, et cetera. So these documents don't give us any rights. All they do is enshrine rights that God has given us. But when you take God out of the picture, as John Dewey did, you end up with a situation where you no longer have an external source of rights, you no longer have an objective source of freedom, source of rights, and you end up moving toward this global system. And I'm going to show you some quotes from these guys. I hope all the videos will work so you can see that it's kind of a bipartisan movement. For those of you who were there for the deep state speech, you'll recognize some of this. But I want to show you where these people are going and what they say. So they are literally looking for a world in which a credible United Nations can use its war-making powers, they call them peacemaking powers, to build a world where the vision of the UN's founders can become reality. Now, if we know anything about the UN's founders, that should be really alarming, right? You had Stalin on one side. Our side sent Alger Hiss. I don't know if that name rings a bell. He was a high-level diplomat. He ended up being convicted as a Soviet spy. He was working for Stalin. So that's why he got to be the first Secretary General of the United Nations. They won't teach you that in history class anymore. But let's take a look here.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
There you go. So straight from President George H.W. Bush. And of course, he's not the only one who believes this, right? There's plenty of other people who believe this.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
After 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
Bush and Clinton agree that we need a new world order. And he told us he agrees with Bush's new world order. And we know what Bush's new world order is. Anyways, if you guys were at my deep state speech, you've seen a lot of these high-level politicians, both sides of the aisle, British prime ministers, French, doesn't matter. They all talk about they want this new world order. And what we intend to show here is that education is the vehicle through which they're bringing this about. Because they have our children in their government schools, that's why they're so confident. They have 80 to 90% of our kids who are being indoctrinated in the schools and are getting this exact message. So David Rockefeller, we've talked about him before. His ancestors were some of the ones who financed John Dewey's takeover of education. They also donated the land that the UN building is built on, by the way, incidentally. And he says in his own autobiography, you can read this yourself, pick up a copy at the library, page 405, or whip out your smartphone if you want to fact check it. Some even believe that we're part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and conspiring. So his word is conspiring to build a one-world system, a one-world political and economic system. And then he says, if that's the charge, I stand guilty and I'm proud. So they're bragging. How can they be so confident? How can they be so bold that they'll write in their own autobiography that they're conspiring with a secret cabal against the best interests of their own country to build a one-world system. It's because they have our kids and our grandkids sitting 6, 7, 8 hours a day having this filth injected into their heads. So let's keep going through here, and we'll see some of the tools that they use. So Agenda 21, we're going to talk about a little bit, is a crucial part of this whole agenda. Now, some people will say Agenda 21 is a conspiracy theory. Well, far from being a conspiracy theory, it is neither a conspiracy, because a conspiracy involves secrecy, and this is not secret, and it is not a theory. You can read the entire document yourself, right? I actually went to the Rio Plus 20 summit 20 years after they adopted Agenda 21, and it is very, very real. What I have here is Agenda 21 for children. This is what they use in the schools for your children. So we'll see a little bit about what's in here, and I think everybody in here will be shocked to see what your children are learning. So this global program, this UN Agenda 21, hundreds of pages long, it deals with every aspect of your life: the environment, the education of your children, your government, your local government, your zoning regulations, how you treat your private property. Every single element of your life would be regimented under this program. And they say, well, it's voluntary and non-binding. Okay, it's being implemented nevertheless. So let's see if we can hear Mr. Bush telling us about it.
We've signed a climate convention on the importance of economic instruments and free markets. We're included in this mammoth Agenda 21 document and the Rio Declaration. Let me be clear on one fundamental point. The United States fully intends to be the world's preeminent leader in protecting the global environment.
All right, well, I'm sorry, but that's a video of George H.W. Bush right after he signed Agenda 21, saying America has signed Agenda 21 and we're going to be leaders on this global effort to implement Agenda 21 around the world. So you don't have to believe me, you can believe the president, or you can listen to Nancy Pelosi. She says the same thing, and we have the video of that as well.
The Earth Summit Environmental Leadership Act, as this is known, presents us with an opportunity to follow up on the important work of the Earth Summit to develop its blueprint, Agenda 21, for global environmental action.
It's amazing how all these terrible ideas are so bipartisan, isn't it?
A children's edition of Agenda 21, and it shows you the most amazing propaganda. This is one of the most remarkable pages. It shows all these little children coming down with storks, and it's called the baby bomb, and you see here's God looking so puzzled. He never intended for all these babies to be born. And then this is the most amazing statement: the planet groans every time it registers another birth. So part of Agenda 21 is, of course, to tell our children that the earth is so overpopulated, and for them to even contemplate having another child is just terrible.
Here's the page right here. It's not God, it's gods, right? They have Hindu gods, Muslim gods, you know, all these different gods, and they're all freaking out because babies. What does the real God say in the book of Genesis? Be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth. So what do they teach your children? Children are bad. The planet groans every time a new child arrives. This is what they're teaching their children. This is why so many people don't have grandchildren, right? Because this is what their children were taught in the government schools. And you could spend some time going through this. It is mind-blowing what they're teaching to children. This is an official UN publication, and it's used in schools all over the world. So that's just a brief sample. And going to these UN conferences, I've been to a lot of these UN conferences as a journalist, and this mindset, they don't bother to hide it. You know, I mentioned I was in Rio at the UN Sustainable Development Conference 20 years after they adopted Agenda 21. There was these posters with a sick Earth, and he's got a thermometer sticking out of his mouth. He's got eyes, and he's obviously sick. And the doctor comes up, and he says, I know your problem. You have humans. So humans are the disease, right? And the United Nations is the cure for the disease, and they absolutely intend to reduce the human population. In fact, they have a whole UN agency dedicated to reducing the population. It's called the UN Population Fund. They were caught working with Planned Parenthood and the Communist Chinese government doing forced abortions in China, and this all came out in congressional testimony. So that's who these people are. They talk about choice. They're not about choice. They're about reducing the number of children, reducing the number of people, especially Africans. They have a special thing. We got to have less Africans, right? And they put out these reports. It's all in the open, but that's what they're doing. So now UN Agenda 21 has kind of given way to Agenda 2030. I mean, UN Agenda 21 is still in place, but Agenda 2030 is the next phase. This is their marketing poster, and we'll go through a couple of these and see what it is that they intend for humanity. So Ban Ki-moon, who was the head of the UN when they adopted this, he says this is the Global Declaration of Interdependence. So that Declaration of Independence thing, that's got to go. This is our new Declaration of Interdependence. He called the UN the Parliament of Humanity. The preamble of this document, all countries, all stakeholders in collaborative partnership will implement this plan. They tell you 20 times in there, no one will be left behind. Not you, not your kids, not your grandkids. No one will be left behind. So let's see what they envision. Oh yeah, the planet is Mother Earth, by the way. So let's see what they envision as part of this program. And, it's actually not a long document. I recommend that you read it yourselves. But they have, we're going to get rid of hunger, right? We're going to get rid of poverty. Okay, Jesus told us the poor are always going to be with us, right? This is window dressing because nobody is against getting rid of poverty. Maybe we'd have an issue with giving all power and authority to the United Nations to do that. But anyways, obviously we all want to get rid of hunger and poverty. But then they say, never before have world leaders pledged common action across such a broad and universal policy agenda. Goal number 10 is basically global Marxism. Direct quote, they're going to reduce inequality within and among countries. So it's no longer enough just to have national socialism. Now we need international socialism. They tell you that it's only going to be possible, this is a quote, if wealth is shared and income inequality is addressed. They go on to say, we commit to making fundamental changes in the way that our societies produce and consume goods and services. Right? I mean, it sounds, or Castro, or Mao, or Robert Mugabe, right? We know this rhetoric. We're going to have income equality and redistribute the wealth. Number 13, the climate is actually a crucial component to this because it's what justifies almost all the rest of this. So let's
Mr. President,
let's see here's Obama talking about
Secretary General,
how important climate is to this
fellow
agenda.
leaders. For all the immediate challenges that we gathered to address this week, terrorism, instability, inequality, disease. There's one issue that will define the contours of this century more dramatically than any other, and that is the urgent and growing threat of a changing climate.
Anyways, he says that climate change is the big issue, that all the other issues, it's going to overpass all the other issues, and climate change needs to be at the center. It's more important than terrorism and all the rest of it. So then they come to your children, right? Goal number 4 deals with education, and you need to know this, right? For your grandkids, for your nieces and your nephews. They say children are critical agents of change, and they're going to find in the new goals a platform to channel their infinite capacities for activism into the creation of a better world. So they're talking about your children being critical agents of change, and they're not kidding around, right? Goal number 4 says by 2030, all learners, and by that they really mean all learners, every child in every school on this entire planet needs to have the knowledge and skills to promote sustainable development. So it's not enough just to accept sustainable development or submit to sustainable development. They need to be so brainwashed that they will go out and promote this UN agenda called sustainable development, which really is a totalitarian, anti-Christian ideology. And this is going to be done through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, they say right in the document. Again, you can read this for yourself. They have a critical UN agency that's leading the charge on this. It's UNESCO. Thank you to President Trump. He has announced that we will be withdrawing from this agency. But, I know, right, we should definitely give him a round of applause for that. Ronald Reagan actually withdrew from UNESCO as well for very good reason. Irina Bokova, who was until very recently the head, she was actually a Communist Party member, open Communist Party member in Bulgaria. The communist regime there that she was a part of massacred hundreds of thousands of innocent people for being Christian, for being religious, for being anti-communist. So why wouldn't we put her in charge of the global education ministry, right? And she says, we have the collective duty to empower every child, that includes yours and your grandkids, with the right foundations. And notice they're talking about knowledge and values. So the UN wants to decide the values of your children. This is interesting. And they say it openly, right? To shape the future as responsible global citizens. That term is going to come up over and over and over again. You'll also notice... So Obama's Education Secretary, Arne Duncan, said that UNESCO was the global partner of the U.S. Department of Education in implementing cradle-to-career education reform. He also bragged in a speech to UNESCO that he was using the education system in the United States to turn your children into green global citizens. This was right on the Department of Education's website. You could read it for yourself. Bill Gates, of course, was the big financier of Common Core. He also signed an agreement in 2005 with UNESCO to create a master syllabus for teachers. Right? Remember John Dewey went after the teachers' colleges? Well, they want to come up with a master syllabus to brainwash all the teachers so they can fan out across the globe and brainwash all the students. And they're not messing around. Let's see who else we have here. I have a little video I want to show you guys that comes from UNESCO too, so you can kind of see what they're up to.
Climate change is one of the biggest challenges of our time. It concerns every one of us. Today, our planet hosts 7 billion people. Already now we use far more resources and produce far more greenhouse gases than it can handle. If we do not act now, how can our planet meet the needs of 9 billion of us in 2050? The increased production of greenhouse gases that has changed the Earth's climate and atmosphere is of great concern to scientists, politicians, and citizens around the world. Global warming has caused dramatic reductions in seasonal sea ice. Storms, floods, and droughts are intensified by global warming. Although developing countries have contributed the least to climate change, they suffer the most. Small island states in the Pacific are threatened to disappear due to rising sea levels. It's likely that the number of climate refugees will increase in the future. To ensure that the rights and needs of current and future generations around the world are met, we have to deal with climate change now. But how? Major UN conferences have recognised that education is crucial for shaping sustainable development. The UN Framework Convention on Climate Change aims to provide a framework to address climate change effects caused by human production of greenhouse gases. Education can help us understand the causes of climate change. It can also empower us to take action. One way in which each of us can contribute to reduce greenhouse gas production and climate change effects is to choose a more sustainable lifestyle. Education can motivate us to make this choice. With the Youth Exchange Initiative, UNESCO and UNEP support youth projects on sustainable lifestyles in 45 countries around the world. Education programs can especially increase capacities of those who are endangered the most to deal with impacts of climate change, people from rural areas, coastal communities, girls and women. Dealing with the global challenge of climate change raises the question of what kind of education we need in the future. To cope with uncertain future scenarios, but also to have the chance to shape the world we want to live in, we need to see the bigger picture. Empowering our children and youth today to solve the challenges of tomorrow is a great idea, but how does it actually work? Let us take the example of a group of students from a rural secondary school that discusses climate change and its effects in the classroom. After learning about the causes and effects of greenhouse gases on the Earth's atmosphere in the science class, students then discuss in small groups around what each of them can do to reduce their individual carbon footprint. They develop a checklist on how to save energy at home and in the classroom, and they organise small information meetings for their classmates and the local primary school. As a second action, students start planting local native trees with their biology teacher on the school property. While learning about global and ecological contexts, they also discover their individual possibilities to act and acquire social skills needed for the world of work. Taking on ownership of the project, a group of students also informs the local community about their project at community festivities and provides information to the school magazine and the local newspaper to disseminate their work. We hope that as many schools as possible will follow examples like this, and we will support them in their efforts. Education is a powerful tool to address climate change and to ensure that the rights and needs of people today and tomorrow can be met. Let us use it and get active today.
So there you have it, straight from the horse's mouth. They want to use the schools to brainwash the children to solve climate change. Do we have any believers in the man-made global warming hypothesis in here? Okay, because I've been to a lot of these conferences. I mean, it's very easy to explain what a hoax it is very quickly. President Trump was absolutely right when he called it a hoax. Most Americans recognize it's a hoax, even according to the fake polls that told us Hillary was going to win in a landslide. So I didn't think I needed to spend a lot of time on it. But what they're arguing is that the gas you exhale, carbon dioxide, which is an absolutely critical gas, it makes up a fraction of 1% of all the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. You exhale about 2 pounds of it every day. What they're saying is that this gas is somehow toxic, is going to cause global warming, it's going to cook us all, and so we need to give the UN our freedom and our money and control over our national sovereignty to deal with this demon gas that we exhale, which is supposedly pollution. Now, if you believe that, I've got some really good beachfront property in Nebraska for sale. Talk to me afterwards and we'll go through it. But that's what they're doing to the kids, and we'll see what this looks like in the classroom in just a moment. So climate action in the classroom.
You've heard the reports. The globe's warming. It's our fault, and the consequences will be terrible. Children are frightened.
I worry. My mom worries. The water might rise and it might flood the whole town. We won't be able to survive for long.
What are you most worried will happen?
We'll all die.
Are there some people who say this isn't true?
Yes. Yes.
Might they be right?
No.
How do you know they're not right?
Well, because the earth is getting hotter.
Where do you learn this?
Can't you see?
Oh, can't you see what global warming is doing to me? Can't you see? Oh, can't you see what global warming is doing to me?
One of the main components after educating the students of global warming is that they're given a letter for their families to sign, and this is the congressman or woman. It's for Congress to pass comprehensive climate and energy legislation.
So you get this great certificate that you can take home, and then there's also a list of things that you can do at home and in your classroom that your teacher has to help you. You can bring it home and talk to your family about it.
They're turning the children into little climate activists, little brainwashed zombies who are terrified. You heard the little girl, we're going to die. Right? This is what they're teaching your children because of the gas that you exhale, a gas that makes up a fraction of a percent of all the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, that is crucial to plant survival, that is at historic lows. I mean, why do you think farmers pump CO2 into their greenhouse? It's because God designed plants to have even more CO2 than they have right now. There is absolutely not a CO2 crisis. It is an absolute hoax. And yet they're teaching every one of your children in a government school that it's your fault, you got to give up your money, you got to give up your freedom, you got to give up your ability to govern yourselves to the United Nations to deal with this hoax. So that's how serious it is. Here's another one about how it's working in the United States.
When it comes to climate change, we have the most to lose and the most to gain by fighting it. Young people, ready to take control of our future, and ACE is teaching us how. The ACE Assembly combines climate science with pop culture entertainment to create an unforgettable experience that puts teenagers at the center of the story. ACE's leadership program gives students the knowledge to take action on climate and the skills to lead and inspire others. With nearly 2 million students reached and thousands of leaders trained, ACE is unleashing the power of a new generation to change the course of our future, starting now.
Very similar. It's about how they're going to, teach climate stuff to the kids in school. And to see what the effect of this is going to be, I think it helps to go, look in the rearview mirror and see how this worked before. If you guys remember, that sodomy was still a crime as late as 2001, right? And in that time span, we have gone from the Supreme Court striking down sodomy laws to the Supreme Court creating a so-called right to a homosexual marriage, to the point where we're now thankful when we don't have to celebrate these homosexual marriages with our art and with our speech. That's how fast this transition happened. And this was because of what was done in the schools. And I'm going to show you guys an example of this. This is a video. It's elementary, talking about gay issues in school. This is from 20 years ago, and you can watch what they were doing to the kids. And, this is probably before most of you guys were in government school. But this is what they were doing 20 years ago in the government schools.
Homosexual activists believe that elementary school children should be taught that homosexuality is a natural and normal variation of human sexuality. One homosexual teacher steers his kids to the politically correct view of marriage.
Let me tell you quickly the background. Today, the law says that if you're the same sex, 2 men and 2 women, you can't get married. It is against the law. And I thought that it might be kind of fun for us to sort of be pretend judges for a few minutes. What I'm going to give each of you is a sheet that just tells you that some people think that it's wrong for gays to get married, that it's not natural, and that it goes against what a family is. Other people think that the state should not decide these things, that it should just be up to 2 adults to decide what they want to do. What do you think the answer to these questions are? Should gays be allowed to marry? Should they not?
I don't see why they shouldn't. I don't see why they shouldn't get married. I know, I mean, they love each other. It's just like any other people. I think gay people should get married. Guys, if they love someone, let them get married. I know. Let's say if Andres wanted to get married to Eric. I'm just doing this, but I am the judge, and I'm saying, no, you 2 can't get married. I don't care if you love them. You can't get married. How do you think you guys would feel? Mad? Yeah, exactly. So you think that they can't get married? I don't know.
So now you know how we got to where we are today in the culture. What do you think is going to happen in 20 years when all these poor kids that are being told to be terrified of global warming, that we need the UN to save us from global warming, when they graduate and when they become voters? Well, you can imagine what the implications will be. So I want to talk just a little bit about the dumbing down component. Now, the dumbing down, you know, I've showed you how they're indoctrinating the kids. Now I want to show you how they're dumbing them down and reducing their ability to even understand the world. They're destroying their ability to even educate themselves. That's how serious this crisis is, and it's very easy to demonstrate. So my colleague, Dr. Sam Blumenfeld, and he passed away a couple years ago, but he spent 50 years of his life investigating education. He wrote 12 books on education, and he was one of, in my opinion, the leading experts on these subjects. So it was an honor and a pleasure to work with him. Phyllis Schlafly, Ron Paul, lots of big conservatives have all said everyone needs to read this book. Because what we do is we show how they are deliberately dumbing down the kids. You know, we all know the kids are getting dumber, right? Just talk to your grandkids and you'll have all the evidence you need. But what we show is that this is an orchestrated campaign. So one of the key tools is the way they teach reading in the schools. We talked about Horace Mann earlier. He pushed this idea into the schools of the whole word method, where instead of teaching kids to read by teaching them that a C makes a K sound and an R makes a and so on, each letter is a symbol that represents a sound, they wanted to teach the kids how to read by teaching them that each word is a symbol in and of itself. So this was originally developed for deaf children. You know, the reverend who developed it had the best of intentions. Deaf children can't hear sounds, so he wanted to find a way for them to be able to read something. But when you apply this to non-deaf children, it causes illiteracy on a massive scale because we have a phonetic writing system. Our writing system is symbols that represent sounds. If you teach children that they see this squiggly lines and that means cat, then they don't connect the sounds that the symbols represent and figure out how to decode it. So Horace Mann tried this in the schools in Boston. It was a total disaster. Within 3 years, all the headmasters of the schools said, no way, we're done, this is ridiculous, and you should read their essay, it's brilliant. They said, this flies in the face of logic, it is absurd, we're not going to do it anymore. So then John Dewey came along and he said, that'll be perfect. And so he got this put into our schools all across the country. Some of you might even remember some of the books, right? Dick and Jane, right? See, Spot, Run, right? So this is the sight word method of training. If you were fortunate enough to be taught phonics before you were exposed to this quackery, you're probably still a good reader today. If you weren't, you might still struggle, and you might wonder why. Now you know. This produces dyslexia. It was an absolute disaster. It was a crucial part of the Dewey Plan to reintroduce this and to get it spread out all across the country. Rockefeller helped with this with a $3 million grant. And people have been sounding the alarm about this for a really long time. Right? The Boston headmasters back in the 1840s said, this is quackery. We're not going to use it anymore. In 1955, when this method was really starting to get widespread after World War II, thanks to Dewey, Rudolph Flesch wrote Why Johnny Can't Read. And he said, this is crazy. The reason why the kids can't read today is because they're learning to read using a quack method, and it doesn't work. So that's why we got the illiteracy crisis. That caused a massive backlash. Phonics was restored in many cases, and of course, they snuck it back in, right? They're not ignorant. They do this on purpose, and we'll see that. Dr. Seuss. Right, Dr. Seuss was one of the leading purveyors of this, and he ended up saying, I think killing phonics was one of the greatest causes of illiteracy in this country. Dr. Sam Blumenfeld, who I co-wrote this book with, he wrote The New Illiterates in 1973. He broke down the leading methods of teaching reading that were then in use back in the 70s in the schools, and he showed how these are the cause of the mass illiteracy that we have in this country. So neuroscience now confirms this. They can do brain scans on children who've learned to read the correct way versus children who've had their brains scrambled with this whole word method. And this guy's a progressive, the scientist who did these studies. He says the whole language approach is inefficient, regardless of socioeconomic background, blah, blah, blah. It's well established, it's corroborated. And again, this guy's a progressive, but he's saying don't use the whole word method because kids can't learn to read that way. And that should be common sense. And I just want to show you, so these sight words are still used in the classroom despite being exposed as quackery more than 150 years ago. They're actually mandated under Common Core, believe it or not. In kindergarten, they have the children under mandate memorizing sight words. So they say Common Core for kindergarten, I think it's RFK3C, read common high-frequency words by sight. This is before they start getting phonics, so they have kids memorizing lists of words. I'll show you what it looks like. So that's what the kindergarten kids in America are doing. Instead of learning the sound of the letters, and they add it in later because parents would freak out otherwise, but this is what they do in kindergarten. They get the kids memorizing whole words, and this completely ruins the way that their brain gets wired in terms of reading. They start looking at words as if the word itself was a symbol rather than a series of symbols to be decoded by sounding it out. So this causes massive illiteracy, and this is clear even from the government's own statistics. I'm sure none of you are surprised that UNESCO thinks all children should be able to learn sight vocabulary, right? All children all over the world, they want illiterate. And you wonder why, right? An illiterate can't read God's Word, can't read the Declaration of Independence, can't read a history book, can't read an encyclopedia, can't read anything, right? They have to rely on CNN fake news and what they learn in the government schools. So here's some just interesting statistics, and I could go on for hours about the statistics. There's massive evidence of this. In the early 1800s, we had almost universal literacy, even for women in this country. And that's according to a study that was put out by Joel Perlman of Bard College and Boston College's Dennis Shirley. National Education in the United States of America, a study in 1812, said that most young Americans, therefore, can read, write, and cipher, do math. Not more than 4 in 1,000 are unable to write legibly, even neatly. I can't write legibly, and I'm sure a lot of us can't either. But think about that. Not more than 4 in 1,000 kids couldn't read and write, and this was in 1812. So what happened? Did we suddenly forget how to teach children reading? I mean, are we that stupid? Even during the Civil War, this is from the Smithsonian in 2016, 90% for Union soldiers, 80% for Confederate soldiers. So literacy was incredibly widespread. We didn't have a massive government education bureaucracy costing us $1 trillion in tax money every year. But let's look at today's America real quick. According to a federal literacy study in 1993, half of American adults could barely read. 2003 NCES National Assessment of Adult Literacy, again, around half of Americans barely literate. According to the State Education Agency report in Washington, D.C., more than 2/3 of the adult residents, almost all of them victims of the government schools, were functionally illiterate. I mean, they might be able to read a stop sign because they memorized the word stop and they know the shape, but they couldn't read a newspaper to save their lives. This is the most recent statistics from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP. About 1/3 of high school seniors are proficient in reading. That means 2/3 of high school seniors are not proficient in reading. And yet they're giving them high school diplomas. We're spending $20,000, $30,000 a year giving them a college education, which is really just, the cherry on top of the Marxist brainwashing. And we wonder why they can't educate themselves, why they don't know anything. Well, it's by design, right? It's not even their own fault. We also have Common Core. And this is interesting. I serve on a board with Sandra Stotsky and James Milgram. Great people. They weren't actually opposed to national standards, but they were the only two subject matter experts who were put on the Common Core Validation Committee. They described this committee to me as a rubber stamp body. They deliberately picked people that they thought would rubber stamp these standards. Sandra Stotsky refused to sign off. The only English language expert said, no way I'm signing off on that. That's going to dumb the kids down. It's going to reduce their critical thinking abilities. We're taking all the classic literature out. I'm not signing. Now she goes around, testifies in state legislatures about what a disaster this is. Dr. James Milgram. the only math expert on this Common Core Validation Committee, mathematician from Stanford, said there's no way I'm signing off on those things. They're terrible. It's confusing, ridiculous. Some of it is actually based on incorrect math. And so the Common Core people said, hey, that'll be perfect. Let's roll it out nationwide. Obama used federal grants to make sure every one of our states, including the 4 who said they didn't take it, ended up with this educational program in their schools. And I want to just show you a little bit about, well, pseudoscience. They also have Common Core science standards. They call them next generation science standards. Same people who brought you Common Core. And surprise, 2 of the key themes, man-made global warming. This is a direct quote from the Sanders. Human activities are a major factor in the current rise in the Earth's temperature. And then evolution, right? No creator, you just came from slime. Obviously, you don't have inalienable rights because you don't have a creator, right? So let's look at just how bad the math is for Common Core. I want you guys to see this. You almost can't believe it until you see it, so.
What does Common Core mean for your kids? Well, here's a sample math problem.
Compose and decompose numbers from 11 to 19 into 10 ones and some further ones by using objects or drawings and record each composition.
That's my producer, Ricky Ratliff, right outside the studio asking people to solve a Common Core math problem.
10 plus 8. Understand that these numbers are composed of 10 ones and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Seem complex? No kidding. And yet that is a problem for kindergarten students, 5- and 6-year-olds. Seems crazy to me. Here's a question some first graders will get under the standards.
Okay, kids, class is in session.
What is 32 minus 12? 20, right? You just subtract. But not under the new Common Core method.
Why are they going through this backwards method here?
This man who trained in nuclear engineering couldn't understand.
I don't understand.
He wasn't alone.
This is how you arrive at the answer, my friend.
That's insane. That's so many steps.
Why does it need to be so complicated? Why are you adding things when you're trying to subtract?
This is a teacher who's been teaching Common Core.
Can you imagine why they might be confused and frustrated?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the teacher tried to explain another kindergarten problem using Common Core standards.
The subtraction sentence would be 7 minus 4. There's 3 left. But if you need one that relates to it, it would be this one because it has all the same numbers.
I don't understand though. We just said subtraction sentence, but you're showing me addition.
Yeah.
So there's some Common Core math for you, and that's for the little kids. Imagine how it gets for the bigger kids. It's insane. So these people also believe that it takes a village to raise a child, to quote our favorite Hillary Clinton, and I want to show you guys
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
Because, I mean, it worked so good on the collective farms of the Soviet Union, right? Yeah, that was on MSNBC, I kid you not. And that's the mindset that these people have. We're going to collectivize the children. So, crazy stuff, guys, I'm telling you. That's why I wanted to show you guys the videos, because this stuff, you know, you can tell somebody and they'll say, yeah, right, that's ridiculous. But here, I want to show you guys Charlotte Iserbit. She's actually a friend of mine.
You think the purpose of education is reading, writing, and arithmetic? The purpose of education is to change the thoughts, actions, and feelings of students.
And so she was a very high-level person in the Department of Education under the Reagan administration. She found out what was going on. She said, whoa, this is crazy. Started leaking documents out to the conservative press. Thank goodness for whistleblowers like that. But what she exposed was that there was a deliberate dumbing down of the children and that it was being done to harmonize the U.S. and the Soviet systems to bring about a one-world system. As you saw, George Bush called it a new world order. So, you know, now I bring up the guns just because the guns are in the news. You know, the kids are marching around doing die-ins at Publix and whatever. They don't have to take the guns, right? They have to take the kids instead. And they've got 80 to 90% of our kids in the government schools. What do you think is going to happen when we all die and these kids are voting? Are we going to have gun rights anymore? Are we going to have any rights anymore? Absolutely not, right? And that is the plan. That's why they're so confident of victory.
Joining us right now is economics professor at Valencia College down in Florida, Jack Chambliss. Jack, good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much. I understand on one of the first days of your class, which is predominantly sophomores, you asked the kids to get out, write a 10-minute essay on what the American dream means to them. And this year, the results were jaw-dropping. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, in addition to asking them what the American dream looks like for them, I then had them write specifically what they wanted the federal government to do to help them achieve that dream.
Right.
When it came to the part about the federal government, 8 out of 10 students said that they wanted free health care, they wanted the government to pay for their tuition, they wanted the government to pay for the down payment on their house, they expected the government to, quote, give them a job. Many of them said that they wanted the government to tax wealthier individuals so that they would have an opportunity to have a better life.
Well, where do you think this sense of entitlement comes from?
Well, certainly I think a big part of it comes from the public schools. When I start talking to my students over the semester and ask them how much time the public schools spend on the principles of John Locke or Adam Smith or Hayek or some of the other people who very clearly said that we have a God-given right to life, liberty, and property, but the government doesn't have a responsibility to provide things for us. When I ask them how much of this they learn in their classes, K through 12, they stare at me and they say, well, we've never heard these sorts of things.
There you go. So we're going to take a brief 20-second pause so he can put an interruption in the video, and then we'll go to the concluding remarks. But I mean, that's what they're teaching the kids in the school, right? I mean, that is what they're teaching the kids. My colleague, Dr. Duke Pesta, who's working on this project with me, he's a university professor at the University of Wisconsin, and he teaches English literature, but he does the same thing. He gives a survey to his kids. More than half of his kids every year think that America invented slavery, right? They think we invented slavery. That's how brainwashed they are. The nation that ended slavery here and around the world is blamed for inventing slavery by more than half of the kids coming out of the government schools. That's where we are with the government. People involved are me and Ray Moore. I'll tell you a little bit about each of us. And Bob Dreyfus in the back is actually the one who decided to put this together. And so I owe a big debt of gratitude to him. But our plan is basically to get this information to parents, to grandparents, and to get it really into the hands of pastors so that they can warn their congregations about what's happening. There was a survey done by the Nehemiah Institute. Almost 80% of Christian children who go through the public school system will leave the church and will leave the faith by the time they get out the other end. So pastors, I mean, your churches depend on this. So we have a great team put together, and we're going to put together a book, some DVDs. We're going to be doing speeches across the country. And what we want to do is get this information to the parents and to everybody so that we can get the kids out of the school system. So this is E. Ray Moore. Amazing guy. He founded Frontline Ministries 20 years ago, and his goal was always to get Christian parents to wake up and take their kids out of the government school. He said, get your kids out of the pagan, godless schools, or they're going to be brainwashed, they're going to turn against you, they're going to leave the church, etc. He's done a book, he's done Indoctrination, he's an executive producer, he's an amazing guy, and he's a former chaplain who's working with us. Then we have Israel Wayne. He wrote this fantastic book that I just finished reading and reviewing, Does God Have an Opinion on Education? Spoiler alert, yes he does. If you open up his word, you'll find it, and I'll leave you with a few quotes from Scripture. Then we have Dr. Duke Pesta. He runs the Freedom Project Academy where I teach. It's an online Christian school for, it's kind of like a support thing for homeschoolers. Not all parents feel qualified to homeschool, so that's an option for parents who want it. There's a lot of options out there like that. There's no longer any more excuse for, oh, well, I can't afford it, I can't do it, I can't teach my kids. And so he's also the professor at the University of Wisconsin that I mentioned. So that's and then Bob Dreyfus in the back, and our friend Pat Markham is doing our marketing for us. So after all this, we have, first of all, a patriotic duty to our country. Our forefathers put their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors on the line to make sure we could have freedom, to make sure we could have a free government that would protect our God-given rights. And, for us to make a small sacrifice and remove our children from these indoctrination centers is nothing by comparison, right? And it's a lot of fun, too. I can tell you, I homeschool my kids. It is so fun. It's so awesome. It's so rewarding. And the quality of the education. Even on the government's dumbed-down tests, homeschoolers perform on average 30 percentile points higher than kids in the public schools. If you have a lot of money, you can put them in a good private Christian school. Do something to get them out of these environments where they're being dumbed down and indoctrinated. Then we have, as Christians, an obligation here as well. Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he's old, he will not depart from it. I challenge you, you can read Scripture all day, every day. You will never find a verse that says, give your children to Caesar so that they can be educated, right? Who does God assign education to? The parents, right? The parents are the primary teachers of the children. Ephesians 6:4, fathers, do not provoke your children. Bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord, right? Deuteronomy 11:9, you shall teach them to your children, talking about the laws, talking of them when you are sitting in your house and when you're walking by the way and when you lie down and when you rise. Right? And then finally, Hosea 4:6. God says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. What do you think is going to happen when all these kids come out of the government schools with absolutely no knowledge? They'll know that there's 150 genders. They'll know that we're all going to die from global warming. They'll know all kinds of nonsense, but they won't know anything. You remember, the fear of the Lord is the foundation, the beginning of wisdom and the beginning of knowledge. What are they going to know if they come out of these pagan schools where they teach them that they came from slime and monkeys and all the rest of it? Well, they're going to know nothing, right, except that they should surrender their liberty, surrender their money, surrender their country to the globalist New World Order that we heard George Bush talking about. So that's all I have. I think Bob might have a survey in the back. If you guys would be so kind to take it, we really want your feedback. And thank you guys. God bless you guys, and God bless America. Thank you, Pastor.
You enjoy this tonight? Wow, I hear a guy like that talk. The amount of knowledge that is in the brain is astounding. And he just, it comes out so beautifully. So we appreciate him taking time to come and share with us tonight. We will do other things like this in the future. As a matter of fact, I just made a date for Kirk to come and be with us on a Sunday morning. And anyway, we hope that you will keep abreast of the things that are going on through email by filling out that card. And also, as you leave tonight, I've asked our ushers to just be at the back door. We want to give an offering to cover expenses for our speaker. And also, don't make him have to carry a box of books back to the car. There's no sense in that, right? So pick up the books that are on the table and share them with your children and your grandchildren. I may be a part of a dying breed, but I belong with the Black Cloak Brigade. Yeah, I'm one of those rebels preachers that stood in the pulpit, and the sermons that they preached became the leaflets that were passed out in New England that became the antithesis for the revolution and for the independence. So I'm one of those guys that wants to lead my congregation into battle, just like they did. And the battle is not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities, And so we have to be educated in order to understand our enemy and understand what he is doing in the world that we live in. Amen? So that's part of the reason why we are having these, and we hope that you enjoyed. Would you just bow with me? Father, thank you for the evening that you have given us together. Thank you for Alex. Thank you for those like him whose minds have been opened to see what is taking place in the world that we're living in and in this great nation. And Lord, we pray for America right now. We pray for a better understanding of parents and grandparents, of our responsibilities to teach our children, to train our children in the way that they should go. And Father, we do not want to lose our children from the church and our grandchildren from the church and from serving you and knowing you. And Lord, we ask that you would put in our hearts, each and every one of us, how we should individually respond to what we have seen tonight and what we have been taught. And I pray, Lord, that the impact will be great. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless all of you. The ushers will be at the back door. Amen.